was catch up. I do see we're recording. Flip over to present. Perfect. So today's webinar is going to be about the COVID-19 protocols and best practices. I do just kind of want to preface this webinar by just kind of talking about what the drive, chip, and putt as a whole has kind of faced over the last year or so. So in 2020, we did have to cancel the entire qualifying season. It was a really difficult decision made by the founding partners. It was made in March or April. And at that time, they just did not feel like we had the ability and the strategies and the best practices put into place in order to have hundreds of kids at one facility at one time. So they did just cancel the entire qualifying season. And it did create a really unfortunate situation for the people who were 15 and did not qualify for the national championship, because essentially they've kind of lost a year of eligibility and they lost a year of being able to compete at drive, chip, and putt. They did go through kind of all of the strategies on trying to figure out if it was possible to kind of add in an extra age division. But ultimately that just created a lot of difficult situations when it comes to years to come down the road, and creating that extra year of eligibility. So it was just kind of decided to leave the age groups as is. But what we really want to kind of keep in mind as we move of our kids, we want to make sure that we're creating really healthy and safe environments for them to compete at. So they have the Drive, Chip, and Putt Task Force has gone to the Cleveland Clinic. We have gotten all of our health and safety protocols reviewed by them, and kind of this is the outcome of that review with the Cleveland Clinic and what they recommend we do to create a healthy environment for our players, to make sure that we don't lose more kids in their ability to compete in this program. So we do really need a lot of your buy-in and support with these protocols and best practices, regardless of what you typically do at your facility, in order to create that healthy, comfortable, and consistent experience for all of the qualifiers. There are over 324 local qualifiers throughout the nation, and these protocols right now are put into place for all 325 of them. So these are kind of those first protocols that are going to be put into place for everybody throughout the nation. So I'd really love us to kind of rise to that challenge and create the best experience for our players and for our staff and our volunteers. And just note that we are taking additional precautions with the drive, chip, and putt, which is why things might not be kind of what you traditionally do at your facility, because we recognize that we're going to have families traveling outside of their county and their local environment to compete in drive, chip, and putt. And that's not something we can really control, especially in Michigan being so spread out. We may have some Detroit kids who some are up north or are traveling up north and play in one of those qualifiers, and vice versa as well. And when it comes to travel, we do want to make sure we're creating additional safety measures, because we don't want to jeopardize your staff, your volunteers, or the players' safety at an event. So we do recognize that this is a really fluid environment. Things are changing sometimes on a weekly basis. I know here at East Lansing, there are a ton of murmurs about a big outbreak coming with March Madness, St. Patrick's Day, being in a college town. So we recognize that things change on a weekly basis. Right now, we'd love for you to plan your drive, chip, and putt with these safety measures that I'm going to review today. And if things change, we will let you know. But we kind of have a back to golf guidelines for drive, chip, and putt specifically, that has been reviewed with the Cleveland Clinic, that says if you're at this stage, these recommendations are in order. And if you're at this stage, these recommendations. So we do have that set and ready to go. So if things dramatically improve, those vaccine rollouts are looking great, we are able to change with that environment as well. So here are some of the requirements that are going to be at every single one of the 324 plus drive, chip, and putt local qualifiers. The biggest one, and I think the one that people are going to have the hardest time with, would be that masks must be worn at all times, even if you are outdoors. They must be worn by players, spectators, volunteers, and staff. So that's everybody at the drive, chip, and putt must be wearing a mask. We understand that it is an outdoor event. We're able to keep our social distancing, but this is what the Cleveland Clinic told us that we needed to do to create a healthy environment. So that is going to be in place as of right now at every single one of the 324 local qualifiers. We are limiting it so that players can only check in 45 minutes before their start time, and they can only use the practice facility after they check in. This is really going to help us keep the amount of kids in the drive, chip, and putt competition zone to around 30 to 40 kids, which makes sure that we're following any local guidelines for outdoor gathering and whatnot. So it is really important that we limit that to 45 minutes. It's actually about the same time that they would get at the national championship. Would be 45 minutes prior to the competition. It gives them about 15 minutes at each station. Players must use their own equipment. Obviously, if we're dealing with siblings, they can share the equipment, people from the same household. But what we're talking about with players using their own equipment is traditionally a drive, chip, and putt will have a set of golf clubs there for somebody who doesn't have them. We really want to eliminate that this year, making it so that the equipment isn't going into multiple people's hands. If you do have rental equipment out there for the kids to use, we will need to make sure it's sanitized each time before it gets passed on to another player. And that's something that kind of can be handled case by case. But we are requesting the kids use their own equipment at these local qualifiers. If a player is exhibiting signs of COVID-19, they must stay home. The parent will get a push notification 24 hours before the drive, chip, and putt, and they do have to verify that they are not experiencing COVID-19 symptoms before they can compete. After the awards of each divisions, the players will be asked to leave the drive, chip, and putt competition area. So we aren't asking them to leave the property. So this is actually a really neat opportunity for you guys to kind of have either a stay and play package or another opportunity for the players to go out and play the golf course while they're there. We're just going to be asking them to leave the competition area so we can, again, keep it to around 30 to 40 kids in that zone at a time. We will be implementing some social distancing measures, putting some cones out and trying to keep the kids spread out as much as possible. I recognize that that's a much difficult task. You see it all the time in the grocery store or anywhere. They have the signs out and people don't necessarily follow them, but we're going to make sure that we have the signs out, we have cones out, and we have space designated so that people can keep social distance. We are asking the players to reduce the number of spectators in their party to household family members only. If there are large groups of people gathering in one area, we will ask them to leave or disperse to break up a little bit. The reason that we aren't limiting the number of spectators, let's say to 1 or 2 spectators per child, is because that could create some really difficult situations for families. If one parent is working and the other is watching the children, they have 3 or 4 kids and only one is competing, they may have to, get somebody to watch the other kids while they bring the drive, chip, and putt player to the competition. And we really just kind of want to avoid those burdens and those hurdles for the families. So we're asking the players to reduce it to household family members only at this time. And that's also going to help reduce the number of people kind of gathering around the DCP stations. We are going to avoid gathering at scoring by using the Drive, Chip, and Putt website. And there is a Drive, Chip, and Putt app. It is still in the beta testing right now, but it should be live here, I've heard, at the end of the week. And parents can go ahead and download that app, and the scoreboard will be there live as soon as it's entered into the computer. so that the parents can check that and they're able to view the results, not all standing around one paper scoreboard. So I'm going to pause here and let's talk about any of your questions or concerns about some of the requirements.
Chelsea, is all this information going to be online when we sit down and able to train our folks?
Yes. Yes, it is online. And I think in the next couple of slides, I don't remember if it's the next one or two down the road, I'm going to show you exactly where it's posted. So there's a really in-depth version that's on the Michigan PGA website. And then there's a bullet pointed version, just kind of like what's on the slide right here, that will be sent out to the parents, to the players, to you and your staff. And it's on the Drive, Chip, and Putt portal, so that when the parents are registering, it's right in front of them as they're selecting their local qualifier. And then I'll be sending you guys in the volunteer template email. It also has these bullet points as well, so that you can help use that with your volunteers. Perfect. Any other questions? All right. So we'll move on to best practices. These are just some of the suggestions that's going to make things just a little bit easier to help create that space and that distance. Recommend just having multiple tables at the station so that kids can pass scorecards back and forth. If you do have the tables out, I also recommend putting a rock or a paperweight on the table for wind, so that when the player sets it down, if there's a gust of wind, they're not chasing it around. I know I travel with a box of rocks that I let the interns paint at the beginning of the year. They're pretty fun and colorful. I'll always bring those with me if you don't have paperweights or rocks, but just those little river rocks work really well for this. We are recommending, this is just a best practice, so it's not on that requirement sheet, but we are recommending that the player retrieve their own golf ball at Chip and Putt. So we would recommend having the volunteer use a golf club or a shag bag or their foot to clear the grid after each shot. And they can move the golf balls over to a pile, and then the child can go ahead and pick them up themselves. It just kind of helps reduce the number of things that volunteer is touching. And then we do want to limit the number of players warming up in small areas. So if you have a really small chipping or practice green, you might want to put a sign out that says, you know, only 4 or 5 people can warm up at this station at a time. And that's just going to help create an easier environment for people to social distance. And then we actually have on the Drive, Chip, and Putt app, if you are using some volunteers who are more tech savvy, so somebody who can navigate an iPhone or their Android pretty well, meaning maybe not your most senior volunteers, we actually do have a way for them to enter the scores electronically. So they download the app and they put in a scoring code, and they're able to actually input the scores right there on their phone as each child comes in. It will have kind of like a drop-down bar, so it's made a little bit dummy-proof where they're only able to enter the valid scores. So for Chip and Putt, those valid scores are 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Those would be the only numbers they could select from. And then you don't actually need data to enter the scores in, so they can do this offline. And once they're finished with their shift, once they hook their phone back up to Wi-Fi, all of those scores will automatically sync. If you want them to be using Wi-Fi, so that it's kind of more or less like a live scoring as their kids are going by, that's always an option as well. But we just recommend telling them that before they get there in case they have a limited data plan or something like that. But it is really cool. I will provide some more information. Again, that app's still in the beta testing. It should be done, I think, by the end of the week is what I've heard. But I'd love to talk to anybody about more information on how to use the digital scorecards, and that would actually remove the need for physical scorecards completely. So kind of exciting about that. I don't recommend using this method if you have your volunteers that are 60 and over, because it could be a little bit frustrating and difficult for them, and we don't want that experience. So here's some of the waivers and parent communications that are going out about COVID-19 and the event in general. So the parents do have to check in 24 hours in advance through the Drive Chip and Putt portal. They do have to verify that their child is not actively experiencing COVID-19 symptoms or has been exposed to somebody who has. Parents have also agreed to follow all of the COVID-19 safety guidelines that we just reviewed in that required slide. So they have signed off and agreed to follow them, whether they read that or not. They did sign it in order to register. Parents have also signed a digital release, meaning that you can take photos of the kids on site during the competition, and you could use them for advertisements if you want. So if you take some photos, you can use it the next year to advertise for Drive, Chip, and Putt. And then parents will be emailed a bullet-pointed version of the COVID-19 guidelines prior to the event with the pairings. There's also the in-depth guidelines on the Michigan PGA website, and then the bullet-pointed version is on the Drive, Chip, and Putt website under each individual local qualifier. So it's on every single page as a parent starts to register for the event. Some of the things that we recommend for you and your staff and your volunteers: it's recommended that you have your staff fill out a COVID safety checklist the day of the event, just confirming that they aren't experiencing symptoms. This can be written or verbal, so it might just be something you ask everybody at the beginning of the day. You and your staff are going to be asked to wear masks at all times. Obviously, when you're setting up for the event and you're able to be distanced, you can remove your mask. If you hop into your office, you can use your best judgment of that. But when you are kind of in that Drive, Chip, and Putt competition zone, you are going to be asked to be wearing a mask. It is recommended that you do have a couple of disposable masks on hand for the volunteers. In the volunteer pre-event email, it does kind of have bolded that they are asked to bring a mask for this event, but just in case somebody forgets, it's just recommended to have some out there. You do have the authority to remove a parent or player from the competition for not complying with the COVID-19 guidelines. We recommend giving at least one warning before removing a player. However, it is really up to your discretion. So if it's a simple infraction, like they aren't wearing their mask or they aren't distancing, obviously that's a situation where a gentle reminder and a warning is in place. But if they're purposefully coughing or spitting on somebody, that might be a situation where there's no warning and they're just asked to leave. Hopefully, we don't encounter any of those situations. But you do have that authority. So I just want to make that clear to you guys that if you are uncomfortable with a situation, you can remove that parent or player. We're going to go through just a few of the stations and just kind of talk about what recommendations and accommodations we have to just make that station run a little bit smoother in terms of COVID. So for all of the stations, it's just a really good idea to have tables set up. So that for registration in particular, it's important so that the players can pick up their tee gifts and the paperwork themselves. Registration does need to be outside. And at this station, we recommend having the COVID-19 guidelines, kind of the bullet-pointed version, printed out and front and center on the table so that the parents are reminded again before they kind of step on property. I will provide you with that flyer so it kind of has a nice Drive, Chip, and Putt formatting and feel to it. And then you can either kind of put it in one of those clear stands or just tape it to the table for the parents to see as they're coming onto the property. At the drive station, again, we recommend the table to pass scorecards back and forth. If the child has trouble teeing up the golf ball, we recommend you having a parent help them or one of their siblings if they're nearby. That way, you can kind of use that same person from the household. We recommend having a roped off area or some cones for some players to stand by while they're waiting for their turn to play. And then it's always a good idea to have an extra bottle of hand sanitizer on the table there so that the volunteers can make sure that they're keeping their hands clean. For Chip and Putt, they're both very similar stations. Again, similar to drive, of having a little area roped off or some cones for some players to stand by to help remind them to stay 6 feet apart. We recommend giving the volunteer a golf club or a shag bag to help clear the green after each attempt so they don't have to touch the golf balls. And then we also recommend having one person assigned to remove and replace the flag stick. Typically, that'd be the scorer, the person who's reading off the scores and is on the green and also clearing the green. But we recommend just kind of assigning one person for the day and then having hand sanitizer available as well. Some of the accommodations at scoring, we recommend that you have a table set up with the awards out and on display for the kids. They are little ribbons, so it is a good idea to either have some rocks or a clipboard that you can lay over it so that the wind doesn't blow them away. We really want to avoid handshakes here and physical touch at this station, which includes kind of the elbow and the fist bumps, because that does create a space where people are less than 6 feet apart. So we'd really recommend just verbally congratulating the kids at this station and having them pick up their own award. We'd like to remind people to avoid gathering, which I think this is going to be one of the stations it's going to be a little bit more difficult at. But again, I will have kind of either a printout that you can lay on the table or a little card that we can hand out to the parents on how to view that scoreboard themselves. And then we just recommend having some cones or stations set up for the players to turn in their scorecards that are spaced out. So I believe that is the last slide, and it is. So I'd love to kind of just take a few minutes here. I know this webinar was a little bit shorter than the other, so I'd love to just take a few minutes and talk about any of your concerns about what we just went over or the program in general.
Chelsea, when are you going to, you're going to be, I believe, at Kalamazoo Country Club at spring meeting time?
Yes.
And you're going, I guess my concern is getting how to set up the putting and chipping area, how you go through and do that. When are you going to cover that? Or
Yeah,
have you?
so that would be covered at one of the in-person trainings or at the Eastern or Western chapter meeting.
Okay.
I also have videos on the website about that, but I'll kind of review it real quick with you. So in your drive, chip, and putt kit, you're going to be getting, I think it's 6 sticks of white chalk, just regular plain old sidewalk chalk. And then you also get some string. And the easiest way that I've found to set up the circles for chip and putt is you either tie the string to the end of a carabiner or tie it to the end of a flag stick, just so you can kind of easy on, easy off. And then you cut a piece of string that's about, for putt, you'll have about 7 feet, so you have a little bit of room to work with. And then you just roll the string around the chalk until you're at 5 feet. Draw it around the thing, roll it again, you're at 4 feet. Draw a circle, roll it again. It's every 1 foot increment for putt and 2 foot increment for chip. So for the chip one, you just cut the string to about 10, 11 feet. And then you can just kind of roll it around. And that way, it's a lot less measuring. You have your measuring tape that's just kind of set out, and you just roll it to the distance. And there's less kind of on and off with the string and whatnot. The sidewalk chalk works extremely well. It also comes off very quickly. So if you're using an actual hole instead of a practice area, you can have the superintendent just turn on the sprinklers. As soon as water is out, it should disappear, especially the white one. It goes away a lot quicker. But it's not going to disappear for the competition if you don't have rain. So it will be out the whole day. You don't have to go out and touch up any lines or anything. But if there is rain, you may have to go out and freshen up things a little bit. You should be able to hopefully still see a little bit of where it was, so you don't have to completely remeasure. But it does go away pretty quickly. And that's kind of a short overview of how to do the chip and the putt circles. And then if you attend an in-person training, I'll show you and have you guys practice. And at this Eastern and Western chapter meeting, that's another opportunity for you guys to practice and see it done. All right. Anything else you guys are concerned about? Anything you'd like more materials on? Any of that sorts? Well, perfect. You guys are an easy group. I will return about 30 minutes to your calendar there. Hopefully you guys will join me at one of our in-person trainings. This is the schedule for in-person training. You can bring as many staff as you'd like to for these events, or volunteers, members of your course. And then we will be at the spring Eastern and Western chapter meetings as well. So we do recommend coming out to at least one of these events, and you can kind of get your hands on the equipment and demo anything you'd like there, as well as the competition. And then again, all of our resources are housed on the Michigan PGA website for you guys. I'll take you through it there real quick. But if you go to junior golf, drive, chip, and putt, local qualifier host site resources, it is going to have all of our previous webinars. We have some training videos, pre-event emails, handouts, and I'll continue to update this with any of our flyers that we create as well. I am going to be switching over to sending out the registration numbers every other week until you guys get access to the portal. I said every week before, but this Friday when I was looking at the numbers, they'd really only changed by 1 or 2 players at each competition. So I didn't want to flood your inboxes. But if at any point in time you do want to know who is registered for your event, feel free to reach out and I can send those to you. But the next update will be going out this Friday for you guys. And we will see you soon, hopefully. Enjoy the rest of your day.